Hey guys, welcome to another drawing video. In this video I'm going to go over some really basic things actually that I don't cover that much, but actually it's usually the first thing that people ask me. We're going to go over like the materials, sharpening your pencil, and like line quality and how to hold the pencil and things like that. Sorry, that's my printer in the background. So getting started here, the paper that I have here, this is actually, let me see, this is this Strathmore layout bond. So this is acid-free bond paper. And so this paper is really nice because it won't disintegrate and yellow if you leave it in the sun, or if you're using newsprint in 100 years, nobody will know what you'll do because the newsprint will disintegrate, and I'm sure you've all seen it like yellow up over time. But smooth newsprint is a beautiful surface to work on, but it's not archival. But for practice, it's fine. But lately I've just been into this nice bond paper. This actually has a nice tooth to it, which takes these pencils nicely. So these are actually the Prismacolor Premier pencil here, and I have a few different colors. This is going to be black, magenta, what is this, Tuscan red, I think I have terracotta, and it's magenta. This is henna, so it's kind of like a pink or something. But whatever colors you like, some of the colors actually, the pigments are a little softer, so things like the magenta actually go down a little smoother. So as far as pencils and paper go, the key is to actually pair the pencil with the paper. So if you're using like the smooth newsprint, which is like really smooth, it's really nice to use with a grittier pencil. Like the popular one is the Conte 2B, or charcoal works well. But for the toothier papers, something waxier like the Progresso or the Prismacolors work well. Whatever paper you use, it might take a little bit of trial and error, but these are kind of what I've settled on to, just because these Prismacolors are actually really easy to find. I used to use this paper called Paxton Bond, which I guess the factory burned down or something, but that was like my favorite paper. And I used to use this Gioconda pencil, which was like, I think those ended up being like $3 a pop, and I'd go through them, like a few of them in a week, a handful of them. So it ended up being really expensive, and ultimately that combination just, you couldn't get anymore. But anyway, so I've kind of learned to settle on things that can be easily obtained. So let's get started here. The first thing I'm going to talk about is actually sharpening your pencils here. And this is actually a pretty important skill, I guess. So what I use is a single edge blade. And, for these Prismacolors, I don't use like the sanding pad or something. If I were using the Conte pencil, I might do that to kind of bring it to a tip. But for this, I'll just use one blade. And the technique here, and let me sharpen this over my board and see if we can see this. Let me try and zoom in, actually. So if you can see this here. What I'll do is hold it between my two fingers here, my thumb and my index. And then on the other hand, I'll hold the pencil, and I will push the blade with my other thumb here. So the idea here is that we cut off the wood, and I'm going to take some of the point here with it. And as I do this, what I'm going to do is rotate the pencil around here. So I'm going one side, rotating a little bit, one side, rotating a little bit. And eventually you get a somewhat rounded tip. And you don't want to make it too long, especially with these pencils. The lead will actually break if you push too hard. And even this maybe is a little too long, but we can roll with it. So I'm not too particular with getting a really fine point. get something to work with, and then we kind of wear it down as we start drawing here. So I'll do another one here, so you can see, and we'll grab this. I'll push down. So I'm pushing down at maybe like a 20-degree angle ish. And yeah, you don't want to carve too much of the wood away, or else the lead itself is not strong enough to support the pressure as you push on it. So I usually have a handful of pencils like this, and I'll just sit there and sharpen all of them before class or before I'm ready to draw, just so you have a good supply. As things go dull, you don't want to kind of break the flow and stop to sharpen things. When I was in school, my teacher, actually, I would see her before every class. She'd have this big pencil box, and she'd just be sitting there sharpening her pencils. And I was like, oh man, I wonder what she has in there. So I looked inside, and it was literally just all the same pencil. It was like this huge box. And she would just sit there before class for like 15 minutes and just sharpen every pencil. So she'd have something ready to go. So I kind of adopted that habit to some degree. And, it's good to be prepared. I see a lot of students come to class with like one pencil or two pencils, and it's just every other pose they're sharpening their pencil. But, just buy a good amount. I would say like 10, honestly. Just get them all sharpened, ready to go. So yeah, that can happen if you drop your pencil. What happens is the lead inside can actually break. So as you're sharpening it, you'll find little cracks as it goes down. So sometimes you'll get pencils where there's just nothing you can do. It'll just break as you sharpen it. And there's really no way to tell. But, so I'll sharpen the rest of these, and then we'll come back and talk about grips and stuff. But these are a few. You can take a look. This is about where I like to get them. So we'll come back in a minute. So one other thing I wanted to point out is going to be these pencil holders here. So these are actually some Japanese pencil holders that I got at the bookstore here. It's called Kinokuniya. But the nice thing about these is that they allow you to kind of use every last bit of your pencil, comfortably. So you have a good length to kind of grip it. So, like this pencil is about this long here. And I have this one here. So this is actually, like a tiny little last bit of the pencil here. So I'm kind of holding out as long as I can. And I have kind of a whole pile of these little tiny ones that, I don't want to throw away. We can still use them. But the nice thing about these is that they're hollow throughout. So if we want to put a longer pencil in, we can actually do something like this. So we don't have to wait till the pencil gets super tiny to use this. We can start using it like this, or if you want a longer pencil, we can use it like this here. If you get those wooden ones, the whole handle is wood, but the part that grips the pencil is only about this long, so you can't actually fit the longer pencil in there. So these are good, again, just for prolonging the life of your pencils here, getting the most out of them. So let's get started here. The first thing I want to talk about is going to be the grip here. So what I do is I'll hold the pencil between my thumb and my index finger, and I'll basically push down on the paper like this. I'm actually resting my fingers on the page here. And let's see, one thing about this is that this allows you to get this kind of fancy calligraphic line. And the way to do that is basically when you drag the pencil lengthwise along the barrel here, you can get a thinner line like this, And if you drag it across the barrel perpendicular, you can get a thicker kind of tonal line here. So this is what I'll use to shade. And we can do this vertically or horizontally. Same thing with the thinner line here. I'm basically just rotating my hand to get the different angles, but the movement comes from my arm. So one thing about this too is that as I'm drawing over time, I'll kind of rotate the pencil a bit as I go. And so what happens is when you drag the pencil across this way or this way, either way you go, you're actually sharpening the pencil. So it allows you to draw longer than if you were to use kind of a writing grip. You're really just digging the pencil tip into the paper and kind of dulling it out. I do use a writing grip if I'm using pen or if I'm drawing in my sketchbook and stuff, but the idea here is that I'm actually kind of sitting back at an arm's length, so I can sort of see the whole page in front of me, and I'm using my arm to really get the marks I want. So it's not so much flicking my wrist or my fingers, but it's really my arm moving. So I didn't actually start off drawing this way. This was definitely something I learned and practiced. And so I'm going to give you now a few exercises to help you sort of get comfortable with this drawing method here. And again, it's really good for getting a diverse set of marks. So like with this, if we want to get this calligraphic line again, it's going to be like a pull into a drag here. Or you can do a push into a drag, and you can kind of get whatever mark you want here. So the first exercise, and by the way, what I used to do is have my drawing board by my bed, and every single morning for about like a year almost, I would basically wake up, get my board out, turn to a page, and then I would just practice these line exercises to get comfortable drawing this way here. So the first one is going to be drawing vertical lines here with that thinner line. So I'm trying to draw a straight line, and the idea here is that you want to draw the longest line possible. So this will be going down the page, and it's not about doing it super fast or like super slow, but as you do it, I'm just applying pressure and feeling things out a little bit, and you kind of hit your stride and find a comfortable speed to go at here. And it's good to kind of draw between lines, so it'll kind of give you some boundaries to work within. And just take your time, and I'll do maybe about 10 or 15 of these. Again, trying to do them as long as possible, trying to keep them straight. And so we do vertical lines, and we can also do horizontal lines here. So with these, it's the same thing, except I'm just going across the page here. And again, it's about doing the longest line possible, controlled. And it's not about going super fast, super slow, but somewhere in the middle. And same thing here, we can do kind of lines between lines. And again, I'd probably do about 10 or 15 of these here. So again, these are kind of going a little wacky. And then the next thing would be doing radiating lines. So we can start from a point here, and we can draw outward from that. And the idea here is that you want 180 degrees of freedom. So with each line, you'll notice that I'm rotating my wrist, but I'm not using my wrist to draw the line. It's just to find the angle of the pencil here. And the line is actually being drawn with my arm moving here. So you can do pushing lines like this, or you can pull back to the center here. But with each line, I'm rotating my wrist to get that pencil perpendicular, or not parallel with the direction of the line I want here. And then we can go down here, and it's basically going to be the same thing down here as far as the range of movement, but we're just doing it kind of the mirrored version of this here. So this again is useful for getting comfortable rotating your hand, because if you want to get this thin line here, say around like something like a circle, what we actually want to do is rotate the pencil along the edge. Remember that the line, to stay thin, has to go lengthwise with the barrel. So if we want to move over this, we actually have to rotate the pencil with that contour here. So I'm not doing a very good job, but that's kind of the idea. So this would be another exercise, is drawing over kind of a circle, or we could do like an ellipse or oval here and do the same thing. Also doing it across like a squiggly line like this, we can practice tracing over this with our thinner line here. And take your time, don't feel like you have to rush this. Again, you'll kind of find a comfortable speed as you get a feel for the paper against kind of the or the pencil against the grit of the paper here. And this basically starts to get at if we're doing kind of an underdrawing or a lay-in for the figure. When we start to add our finishing lines, we're basically going to be tracing over those underlying forms like this. So we want to have that control to kind of wrap around something we've already established here, right? So, we can get a center line here, we can get thicker lines, thinner lines. And also too, we can practice just drawing ellipses. So the idea here is that with the edge of the ellipse, where it meets, you don't want to have kind of these open forms, but you want to try and overlap it so it becomes one sort of continuous line. And one thing I'm not doing is just coming in and drawing an ellipse right off the bat directly, but you'll notice I'm really feeling out the gesture of this and kind of visualizing the form that I want to draw. So this is more actually kind of, well, it comes from like an industrial design or more technical drawing exercise, but it's the same deal, just getting really comfortable drawing these forms and really getting your arm moving here. So the other thing would be things like trying to get that perfect circle here. And with these, I'm not really worried about getting that thin line. It's going to be kind of a transition from thick into thin as the pencil moves around the form, but it's just about moving your arm, feeling things out a little bit, so kind of ghosting things in a little bit before you jump into it. And we can also try and draw some kind of primitive or basic forms here, like a cylinder. This would be an ellipse with two lines down the side here, and then on the bottom it would be kind of a partial ellipse here. But what I'll do is I'll feel through the form a little bit to make sure that as a form, this ellipse kind of makes sense, and it's not just kind of a haphazard curve that goes around the end there. We can also practice drawing things like boxes. So this would be good for drawing straighter lines like this, and then also just basic perspective here. So with each line I make, you'll notice I'm rotating my wrists, but again, the movement comes from the arm here, and I'm going to ghost things in, feel it out before I jump in here. So feel out the angle I want. Let's get this straight, and we can draw through this. So as I do this, what I'm looking at is this line and trying to get this to work between them as it goes back to that convergence point here. So this one's a little off, but it's all right here. So practice a few of these, some ellipses and stuff. So again, I would have my board out, wake up in the morning, practice this, or even when I'm in class or at like a workshop or something, I'll keep a page where I kind of reserve for these exercises, and then during the breaks, when the model's on break or whatever, I'll come back to this page and I'll sit there and I'll practice my line quality and getting comfortable with the pencil again. You can also practice like that pull into a drag here to get thick and thin lines. So yeah, just getting comfortable using the pencil, getting a variety of lines, drawing different forms with this here. And over time, the more you practice it, you get more and more comfortable, and then this will be kind of second nature to you. So these are kind of those exercises. Now let's kind of I want to talk a little bit about, why we would actually use these variety of lines. It's not just for the aesthetic of making things look pretty. So let's grab another page here. All right, so when we're talking about line quality in things, or when we're drawing things with line, I should say, we're actually, as soon as we draw a line, we're really starting to abstract things, because if you think about it, there are actually no lines in reality. We actually tend to see things as kind of value and shapes in terms of how our eye actually works. We see in this sort of contrast here. So with line, as soon as we start to add a line here, to say if we were drawing a face or something, we're actually starting to abstract it into an idea. So line is an idea that will kind of contain forms or shapes within it. So we can play with that, knowing that it is an idea. We can start to communicate concepts with the kind of marks we make here. So one idea is that if we have something like a cylinder, or really any form, forms will have kind of a top and a bottom, so we can emphasize a sense of weight to this form here. So once I draw in this heavier line, we feel this kind of grounded, say on a surface, or we just feel that generally as kind of the bottom to the form. If I draw it, the opposite way, that cylinder actually looks like it's upside down, even though it's kind of, it could be going either way, but we start to feel this like a top and this as like a bottom, right? So it's just through the line weight we start to communicate this idea or concept of a bottom and a top. We can also think about lighting. So if we have, say, like an egg-like shape or an oval here, and we have a light source coming in, we can show or give this a sense of kind of a shadow side without actually throwing any tone there. We feel this as being kind of darker and away from the light, right? So if we added some more forms here, we can push this sense of light to that. So just with line, we can even start to talk about the concepts of lighting, right? And also, we can communicate different types of forms. And the basic idea here is that, if you're drawing something soft, you want to use a softer line. And if you're drawing something hard, you want to use the harder line and straighter, right? So this might be, we could indicate something like cotton or something, just with these softer lines, whereas this would be some kind of rigid box or something, right? So on the figure, that manifests as something like, if you're drawing a thigh here, your upper leg will be sort of a softer contour, and as you transition into the knee, where it's bonier, we're going to feel this sort of harder edge. So I'm pushing more straights. I'm hitting up the line a little bit harder. Conversely, we get these softer lines. Tendon will tend to be harder. And then we transition down into, let's say, something like a calf. And then internally, we're going to feel the corners of the form, or basically the edge of the bone again, as being kind of a harder accent. So that's kind of the idea. We can communicate different things in how we vary up the line. Also, we can show a sense of depth. So softer lines will tend to recede or go back in space, and harder lines will tend to step forward here. And I have to apologize, that's the AC. It's very hot here in California. But anyway, so, with these two marks, even though I drew this one first, we can draw this on top of this hard line, we still feel this hard line stepping forward, in front of these softer lines. So, that's useful when we're doing kind of like an underdrawing. We can keep that drawing fairly soft. And then as we build the drawing up here, we can actually use our harder line. And what you'll notice is that the underdrawing itself will actually start to kind of disappear, or it really starts to become kind of like a tone within the drawing here. So I'm kind of layering the drawings by varying up the lightness or hardness of the line here. And this will play into also things like overlaps. So, when you're doing overlaps and you want something to recede in space, the idea is that we push one thing in front of the other, like this. But, one thing about this is that it's very kind of mechanical here. So to really push and sell the depth and give it a little bit of life, we can let the lines breathe a little bit by leaving some space between them here, letting this line fade out kind of into the mist or into the air around the form. And as we move back in space, we can couple this with the idea of the lines starting to get lighter, and we can sort of push more space behind the lines. So you see how this has a greater sense of depth than this. We really feel this going away from us. So letting things lighten up as they go back, and letting the overlaps kind of breathe a little bit. One more example of that would be if we have kind of squares here, and I'm not really drawing them in perspective or anything, but as they get lighter, we feel like this one is further away from us and this one is closer to us here, right? So varying up not just the line weight, but the line kind of value here. So all these different concepts, you won't necessarily use all of them in every single drawing you do, but where you see opportunities to play them up, like hard versus soft, just having these tools in your toolbox will allow you to communicate different things, right? So let's kind of look at some drawings here, so we can see some examples of this in action. All right, so this first drawing I have here, this is Piazzetta. He is a 17th century Italian artist. You guys might know Tiepolo. He's a little more well known, I guess, but these two guys are buddies, so their styles are very, very similar. So the first thing I want to point out when we look at this drawing is that it seems like a very tonal drawing or tonally driven drawing, but when we break it down, I would argue that it's more of a linear drawing here. So let's take a look. Let's set things up here. So we have his head coming in. We have his brow in here. We have this brow in here. So as I set up this as kind of a lane or underdrawing, I'm using that softer, lighter line with the idea that I'm going to come over this with a harder, darker line to redefine my forms here. So you have his beard coming down, and then his kind of robe here coming in. So when we look at this, we have broad patches of tone in the drawing here. So let's say, in his forehead here, we feel this tone coming in. And then this is kind of wrapping around, tucking into his eye socket here. And we feel this dig in against the glabella here. And then we feel this kind of wrap around his eye. So there is tone going on here, but really it's only being used to define kind of the side plane of his head in general. So this idea of we have a front and we have a side, and then maybe the side plane of his nose. So we're going to feel this tone come in here, and it links into the front and then the side of his nostril. We feel this come down as a shadow kind of over his beard here, and you get a little tone tucking in under his eye here. And then moving around, his ear kind of falls back a little bit, and we also get his side plane of his cheek and this downturn on this side here. But what you'll notice, is as far as getting the modeling and the structure here, he's not coming in and kind of rendering out each plane and giving everything its own value. It's just kind of blocked in as one general value, and then he's pulling out the detail with line here. So in the shadows, he's using much darker line. So say around his ear here, we feel this kind of extend out from the shadows. Compare that, we also get some darker lines around the edge of his hair here. Compare that to with his forehead here. There are some faint lines around his hair. There's a very faint line turning down here, which kind of comes in and then disappears a little bit and comes in, and we have some tone. So in the lighter side, he's giving us a sense of value here with the lighter lines, and then in the darker side we feel the weight of the shadows with this darker line here. What's more, if we look at his eye here, again, he's not coming in and rendering out all the planes, but to show us his eye, he's carving it out with a line like this, a darker line. So he's pushing into the form, into the socket, to get that to recede with this darker sort of line accent here. And around this back edge, it is a little bit darker. He is throwing in some core shadows and stuff. But by and large, a lot of the details and structure here is still indicated by line. So, the smalls in shadow here, we feel the edge of his cheek. And, his nose, he's giving us this harder accent with the tone around the edge, but at the bottom, he's really defining it with this harder line here. And then with things like his beard, he's indicating with these kind of curly, wispy lines here that move around the form. And then his kind of robe here is just kind of a flat value. He's pushing things a little bit darker around the ear, but again, he's not going out of his way to sort of render everything out. Right? It's just to give us the general kind of broad structure to the forms with that tone here. But the detail is brought out with the line here. Right? So, we can feel a little bit more. We have kind of the softer tone around his beard. And we have this sort of harder edge around his robe here. So one thing he's doing, to bring this in front of his beard, he's hitting it with a darker line. and then just blocking it in with a general value. So yeah, again, a very kind of linear based drawing, despite having a lot of tone in here. The tone is kind of secondary to what the line is doing, or it's working with and heightening what the line is doing here. Yeah, so let's kind of look at another example here. All right, so here we have Francois Boucher. So he's a 18th century French painter. Very stylish drawings here. Very kind of energetic. But a few things I want to point out with this drawing here in particular. So let's draw this out a little bit. And we have his torso coming down. And his hips coming out here. His leg coming towards us. We feel this leg coming towards us as well. And along with this arm, comes forward and back. And overall his body is actually going away from us here. So setting up that gesture through space. So what you'll notice, this is a very lively kind of line, but he'll pull out straights where we feel kind of bone come to the surface here. So at his shoulder here, feeling that edge of the scapula coming through. And then the rest of his lines are a little wispier. And then we come through his arm here, triceps. And as we come down to, say, his elbow, we really feel this kind of accented as a harder edge here. He pulls out this corner here. Feel this muscle wrap around. And then the forms around it will tend to have kind of a softer reed to them. But you see how he pulls the accent out. And then as we move down his torso here, as we feel this go away from us in space, what you'll notice is that with his overlaps here on this kind of pinching side, he's letting them really kind of breathe. He's not coming in and giving us a hard and fast connection here like this, but we see the lines like turn in, and then the line behind it comes in a little bit softer and a little bit away from that edge. So he's using that idea to kind of heighten the depth of the overlap here. Of course he's come in and we have some tone, but just like the other one, it's a very linear drawing here. He's not coming in and sort of chiseling out all the individual tones, or like rendering out specific things, but all the definition is really coming in from the line work here. And I would say, like, even a lot of this tone is almost kind of like a thick line, right? And he has this hatching too, moving across the form here. And he's giving us a depth in here between the legs by pulling out these linear accents, pushing it darker to push it in. And then you'll notice he hits a harder edge to the front of the knee here. So he's really communicating, a lot of different things just by varying up his line work. So finding these harder edges, these accents, pushing this sense of kind of shadows in here. Or, we see it again in here where we really feel this dip down with a harder line. And then his leg actually steps out and away from the shadow that's falling over here with this softer line following the side of his leg here. And then we come to the front of his knee again, and we feel that hard accent. And then also too, like, again, this kind of spacing with these overlaps here, letting the line breathe so we can feel that depth. All right, let's look at, I have a couple more here, some different artists we can look at. All right, so this is an illustrator from the 50s named Robert Fawcett. And, you know, I really love his drawing and his mark making. One thing you'll notice is that whatever he's trying to depict, he'll use a different line for it. So, for instance, like her hair, he treats a lot differently. So, you know, he's actually got a kind of a cruder line here, in a sense, where I don't think he's actually kind of coming in with this calligraphic line. So let's kind of change our grip here. And we can see that with her hair here, he is really indicating it with some livelier lines and really just bringing in some kind of curlicues and scribbles. And what you really see in this drawing in particular is the sense of light we get with how he's addressing the line quality here. So on the light side here, we feel these kind of softer lines, and then he's really kind of digging in as we get to the shadows here. There's a very simple kind of tone in here just to kind of turn the edge. But again, it's a very kind of linear drawing, so we really feel on her back here the weight or darkness of the line here compared to her front, which we feel a lot lighter because he's bringing in kind of softer lines here. So he's very good. He's a very good person to look at for a variety of mark making. Let me actually bring up another drawing here. So this portrait here. So, you know, with Robert Fawcett, what he would do is he'd go to his buddies' places who are other illustrators, and he'd grab like the most broken brush in their brush container, and, you know, with like a couple of scraggly hairs, and he'd take it back, and then he'd use it to make these beautiful illustrations. But what you'll notice is that he's really describing everything with kind of a different mark. So from the edge of his face here, you know, it's a thinner line, really just to kind of contain the form here. And then we feel at his eyebrows, he's got these very wispy, you know, almost looks like a paintbrush here. And then we get this thick, kind of jagged line to the side of his eye, and then we get some of these, I wouldn't say they're eyelashes, probably more of a hatching here. And then there's this soft, or this dark into a soft indication here. So there's a great variety, you know, just even in this little section of different line qualities that can be achieved. So, you know, this is with a brush pen, or yeah, like a dry brush or something. But you know, the key here is just to look at the variety of what you can communicate with different types of lines here. So don't think of the line as like just being an outline that you want to use to draw out the outside of the figure or whatever it is you're drawing here. But, you know, it's really a communication tool that can communicate a variety of different things. So we'll look at one more artist here. All right, so this is actually one of my favorite artists here. This is Ivor Hele, and, you know, I'm actually not sure how to pronounce his name, but I'll I'll put it up here so you guys can see. So he is an Australian artist who painted during World War II and the Korean War. But let's kind of look at what he's doing here. So we have this guy. And he has this kind of scraggly hair here. And, you know, these are probably done in person, you know, in the field. So they're kind of quicker, looser, more kind of intuitive drawing than really sort of studied in a studio environment here. But, you know, you get some really great results. And that's part of the appeal, is just how much life these drawings actually have here. So, you know, one big thing we can see here, like with his arm, is he has a very simple line on the outside. And then as we move inward and we feel this shadow here opposite the light coming in, you know, here he's carving out that cast shadow here. And then down here at his bicep, we really feel this very dark line. And again, he's accenting the shadow side to give us a sense of the lighting here. Same thing here around his obliques. We really feel that as a really soft line compared to the tone that comes in here. And then one really beautiful thing, and I'll kind of zoom in on his hand here, is that he's giving us a sense of depth with this by really kind of pulling out this first finger. So you see that kind of come to the forefront here. And then the rest of the fingers kind of fade back. So he's using the line weight, or the value of the line here to show depth, you know, with something as simple as his hand. Also in front of his arm, we feel this line of his shorts here come in heavier. And then this leg as well, we feel on the shadow side these kind of darker accents. We hit the edge of the knee here. And then opposite that, we're going to feel that line kind of lighten up. And he leaves this little break here just before this tendon comes in. Again, pushing that depth here. You know, so there's a lot to learn. You know, they say you take classes to kind of learn what to look for or what to draw, and then you copy artists to learn how to draw it, right? So as I'm doing like master copies and stuff, I'll have kind of a concept in mind that I'm looking for. So maybe it's anatomy. So how does he draw out the anatomy? You know, we have the deltoid coming in and this stuff. Or it could be more like this, where it's about line work. How does he use his lines? You know, where does he push things darker or heavier? Where does he pull in more kind of straights here versus more curves? Right? This is a bonier area. This is the flesh of the calf here. Oh, I guess this was off screen here, this little gap, but you can see that in the reference there. So anyway, that's about it for this. Again, here we can actually see this, the dark on this side of his torso here, which gives it a sense of the shadow here, even without the tone. And the tone is just kind of heightening what the line is doing here. So again, just like the others, a very linear drawing. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Just to give you guys some idea of what I think about when I'm actually, you know, making these fancy lines or making these different kinds of marks. You know, it definitely does have an intent to it. It's not just to look fancy or, you know, just because, but I'm doing it for specific purposes, to call out things, to bring things forward, to push things back, you know, heighten that sense of lighting. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.